Hey everyone, welcome back to Firsthand Globetrotting. If you've ever been to Las Vegas, you know there are about a million things to see and do and experience along the Vegas Strip. It has mile after mile of mega casino resorts lining Las Vegas Boulevard, and every one of them is jam-packed with things to do. No matter where you are on the Strip, chances are you'll have at least one casino and restaurant and show and bar and attraction and nightclub and store within a couple of minutes walk. Most tourists spend their entire vacations without ever leaving the Strip and still have incredible trips. Honestly, the resorts are so big and have so much to do that you could have a great time just in your own hotel. You can go right from the airport to your hotel, spend the entire time exploring the bars and restaurants and entertainment that your resort has without ever setting foot outside, and still have an amazing trip. That's pretty much what Las Vegas is built for. It gives you bright lights and a non-stop party atmosphere and huge monuments to take pictures in front of and entertainment options around every corner and so much more, so there's always something to do here. But what if you want to take a break from all of that and spend some time outside of the city? One of the most popular day trips from Vegas is Grand Canyon West, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. As you walk around the Strip, you'll see signs for Grand Canyon tours everywhere and a bunch of people on the street trying to sell you bus tours. You can pay to do a guided group tour, but it's also a pretty easy self-guided tour if you'd rather just rent a car. I wanted to do this excursion because honestly, with all of the fountains and gardens and buildings everywhere, you forget that you're actually in the middle of a desert. Once you get off the Strip and drive out past the suburbs, things really start to change with the vegetation and dusty ground and the big brown hills in the distance. It feels like a completely different part of the country. Grand Canyon West is in another state, Arizona, and it takes around 2 hours to make the drive, which is around 120 miles or 200 kilometers. So you'll definitely want to make this a full day trip once you factor in 4 hours of driving, plus the time at Grand Canyon West, plus all of the pit stops you want to make on the way. One of the biggest mistakes tourists make is confusing Grand Canyon West with Grand Canyon National Park. The national park's south rim is quite a bit further away from Las Vegas, around 4.5 hours each way, so it's a little bit too far for visiting in one day. The other big difference is the cost. The national park is run by the National Park Service, whereas Grand Canyon West is privately run and is quite a bit more expensive to visit. It's really designed for tourists on bus trips from Vegas, so you'll notice it feels more like a tourist attraction than a park. If you're like me and have never really spent that much time in this part of the country, it's actually a really nice drive seeing all of the barren landscape and rocky hills surrounding the road. Since this is a day trip, you'll definitely want to make some pit stops along the way. Luckily, there are some pretty nice spots on the drive out to the Grand Canyon that are really easy to find, and most of the tour buses will stop at them for quick photo stops. The first place worth checking out is Lake Mead. It's a huge man-made reservoir, and I found it had such a unique look to it with the red desert hills surrounding it and the tiny barren islands sticking out from the middle of the water. I never associate lakes with deserts. I'm so used to seeing them surrounded by trees and greenery, so it was definitely worth stopping at one of the scenic overlooks to see the contrast between the water and the empty surroundings. If you're wondering how a man-made lake ended up in the middle of a desert, it's because one of the biggest engineering feats in American history is on the Nevada-Arizona border. The Hoover Dam is a pretty popular day trip for people to take from Vegas, and you can take guided tours inside of it if you want to see it up close. But if you're hoping to spend most of the day at the Grand Canyon, you'll probably only have time for a quick stop up above where you can get some great panoramic views of the dam. As you get closer to the Grand Canyon, you're going to notice a lot more greenery popping up along the side of the road, which really stands out after all of the barren, empty fields you've been driving through so far. The road you take goes through a huge Joshua tree forest, so there are trees sprouting out of the ground everywhere you look. If you want to see them up close, there are a few little public walking paths where you can pull over, wander around, and get a good look at the trees all around you. They mostly grow in the desert areas of the southwestern United States and northwestern Mexico, so if you've never been here before, then this will be one of your first chances to see them in person. You get the unique look of the Joshua trees and the other vegetation with the backdrop of the nice big hills surrounding you. After spending a few days in the crowds and chaos of Vegas, it's going to feel like a completely different world when you stop at a gas station or restaurant and it's so quiet with endless desert stretching out in front of you. It was only a 2-hour drive, but there were so many times when I couldn't help but pull over along the side of the road so I could get out and marvel at how beautiful everything was out here. If you're like me and have never been to a desert before, it's such a great opportunity to be able to see a completely new type of geography and climate with plants and trees and landscapes and rock formations that were so much different than anything I've seen in person before. It's picture perfect. Honestly, I would have had a great time spending the entire day out in the desert looking at these landscapes, but these were just the pit stops on the way to the real highlight of the trip. When you first get to Grand Canyon West, it's a little bit underwhelming since it's just a parking lot with a big white domed building out in the middle of nowhere without the canyon anywhere in sight. But don't worry, this is just the ticket office and gift shop. As I said at the start, the prices are aimed at Vegas tourists and are pretty high, so I noticed a few people that seemed to have sticker shock when they were paying. I looked up the prices before I went and had a fun time, so I personally think it was worth it. There are 3 sites you can visit at Grand Canyon West, and you have to take a shuttle to get between them. One thing to remember is that the shuttle buses do a circular route in one direction, starting and ending at the ticket office, so you have to see the sites in a fixed order, and it's not easy to go back to the ones you've already passed by. The first stop is at Eagle Point. Once you step off the bus, you're only steps away from the edge of the canyon, and it was even more impressive and breathtaking than it looked like in the pictures. With all of the tourists rushing off the buses, they have some staff there to remind everyone about canyon safety. I thought that was a really good idea, since a lot of people seem to lose their common sense when taking selfies and forget how far the drop to the bottom is. Honestly, even though I was standing pretty far back, it still felt like I was standing at the edge of the world with a huge chasm dropping down to the center of the earth. In my opinion, just getting to see this view was completely worth the 2-hour drive through the desert and the price of admission that I paid. This is a type of attraction that has pictures of it on every travel website and signs for it at every tour desk in Vegas and videos of it everywhere, but looks so much better when you get to see it live and in person. So if you think it looks nice in this video, you'll probably like it even more when you get there. As I've been panning over the canyon, you may have guessed why it's called Eagle Point. Across from where you're standing, there's a rock formation that looks like an eagle spreading its wings. Probably the most famous attraction at Grand Canyon West is the Skywalk, and to get to that, you go to the big visitor center building that's next to the Eagle Point Ridge where the bus dropped you off. It's a big semicircular viewing platform with a glass bottom, and it sticks out from the side so that when you're walking along, you're directly above the canyon with a great view down to the bottom over 4,000 feet below you. It's a pretty unique experience. Unfortunately, it costs extra to do the skywalk, and you can't take your own pictures or videos out there, so you'll need to spend even more money if you want to pay for the professional ones they take. As I've been saying, this is a very touristy place with a lot of extra costs that can sneak up on you here, so plan accordingly. Grand Canyon West is owned and managed by the Hualapai Nation. So one of the really cool things they have at Eagle Point is a small educational walking path where you can learn about them and some other nearby Native American tribes. As a tourist, it would be really easy to come here on a bus, see the canyon, take some great pictures, and never even realize that you're on the Hualapai Reservation and that this is their ancestral land. The trail's theme is the different types of buildings that you would have found in villages, and they have recreations of some of them. It's not a very long loop, but you can read up on the history of some of the structures and then get up close and peek inside to see what they look like. I found the walk also gave me a chance to check out some of the local vegetation surrounding the buildings, and you really get to see that other than the attractions at Eagle Point, it's pretty much empty wilderness as far as you can see. Whenever you're ready, you can hop back on the shuttle and head to Guano Point. Eagle Point was a lot more built up with the visitor center and gift shop and skywalk and the informational path, but this stop is mostly empty with only a small cafe surrounded by all the rocks. Looking back on my visit, this was definitely my favorite of the 3 stops at Grand Canyon West and the one I recommend spending most of your time at. Eagle Point had some wow factor since I got my first ever view of the Grand Canyon as soon as I stepped off the bus, but there was only a short little part of the ridge where you could stand. I wouldn't call it a hike, but Guano Point has a little walking path where you can get a few different views of the canyon and climb some rocks. To me, it felt a little bit more free and open, more like what I would expect the experience to be like at Grand Canyon National Park. There were still plenty of other tourists here, but you could go off and explore more. And because you're able to wander around on your own, you get to see the canyon from a few different angles and viewpoints. As you get further out towards the tip of Guano Point, about as far away as you can get from the shuttle stop, you start to get a really nice view down into the canyon and you can see the Colorado River. You'll also be able to see why they call it Guano Point. They discovered a cave that was full of bat droppings, so they set up a mining operation here so that they could use the guano for fertilizer. It only lasted a few months until an Air Force jet flew into one of the cables and broke it, but the structure is still out here. Near there's a big rock hill. I definitely recommend climbing up the hill since it's nearly right at the tip of Guano Point and gives you the best panoramic views in every direction. Getting to climb up the red rocks all the way to the top was actually a lot of fun, especially when you turn around and get to see down into the bottom of the canyon. Being up at the peak of the hill with the Grand Canyon everywhere I looked was worth the price of admission alone, and felt like I was a million miles away from all of the other really touristy things everywhere else at Grand Canyon West. Guano Point is your last chance to see the Grand Canyon, since once you get back on the shuttle bus, you're taken to Hualapai Ranch. It's a recreation of a small Wild West town, and unfortunately the canyon is nowhere in sight. It's just the ranch off by itself out here. If you want to pose for some pictures, like inside of a jail cell, then this is the place to do it. Honestly, after spending the day driving and making pit stops and seeing the canyon, I wasn't really interested in spending too much time at this stop. They had some staff around who were keeping with the theme, like a rancher out showing his skills with a lasso, roping some wooden bulls. There was also a parlor of magic where you could go inside and see a magician doing some card tricks. I've been telling you all along that Grand Canyon West feels touristy, but Hualapai Ranch was extra touristy. It seemed like they wanted one more attraction at the end, so they built this ranch for easy photo stops and souvenirs. Unless you're traveling with younger kids who want to run around at the ranch, or you really like posing for pictures in front of Wild West themed buildings, then I recommend spending most of your time at Eagle Point and Guano Point and going through Hualapai Ranch quickly. Once you're done here, it's one last shuttle bus to take you back to the main entrance in the parking lot, and then your day at Grand Canyon West is officially over and done with. All that's left is the drive back. So as you saw from this video, it's a pretty busy and touristy place that gets busload after busload of people coming from Vegas, but it has some absolutely gorgeous views. My biggest recommendation before you go is to make sure that you know what Grand Canyon West is and what to expect from your visit. Some of the people there clearly didn't know what it was going to be like before signing up for their tours and looked a little frustrated. Be prepared that this is a tourist stop designed to cater to busloads of tourists coming from Vegas, and it's not the national park. Both of them have Grand Canyon in their name, and it can get confusing, especially if you're visiting from far away and don't know there's a difference. Also, make sure to check the prices before you go. The prices can seem a little expensive, plus there are lots of extra cost add-ons like the skywalk and pictures and food and other things. You can see the current prices on their website, and make sure to ask your tour company what's included and what isn't. Personally, I knew what it was going to be like and what the cost would be before I left, and I had a great time. It was my first time seeing the Grand Canyon, so getting to experience the views and the natural beauty and the incredible size of it was such a great experience for me. If I'm ever near the national park, I'd love to get a chance to experience that too, but this was a really convenient day trip from Vegas, and I'm glad I took the time to do it. The Grand Canyon West experience may not be for everyone, so hopefully this video helped you figure out if it's the type of thing that you want to do. If you have any questions about the day trip, ask me in the comments. While you're at it, like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. On Instagram, I'm Firsthand Globetrotting. On Twitter, I'm Firsthand Globe. Follow me on there. And don't forget, it's an incredible world out there, so pick up your passport and do some firsthand globetrotting of your own.